Um, all right, yeah, thank you both for speaking with me. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the film. I found it to be um disturbingly relevant and dark, but also had that wit and humor to it that was so resonant as well. So congratulations on the movie. I think it's going to please a lot of moviegoers. I want to
Thank
start
you.
off with the
Thank you.
obvious. Yeah, thank you. With the obvious question, like I said, the film feels very timely. The most overt parallels being the parallels between the COVID pandemic and the Spanish flu in 1918. What made you guys want to tell this story now?
I think, and to your point about it being disturbing, which we take as a high compliment. What one of the things that disturbed us most was how little has changed since the early 20th century to today, and it not just the Spanish flu and COVID, but these broad scale emergencies have a way of showing the fault lines of the American class system. And when, what struck us at the time in spring of 2020 was that as native New Yorkers, which Austin and I are, it was a tale of two cities. The wealthy fled to their country castles, and the poor were sort of just unpaid and stuck and imprisoned in the city. And we saw it as an opportunity to tell a darkly satiric tale. Like there's a bleak, almost uh, futility in that nothing has changed from then and now. So we saw it as it was resonant with built-in dramatic potential and humor.
No, it definitely has that, and yeah, taking us back a few years, we did see that, right, that class gap at the beginning of COVID and still now, um as evident by our conversation. Your film deals with a lot of heavy subject matter, but it never becomes, I guess, yeah, too heavy or overwhelming. It always has that sense of humor, that wit underlying everything. Was it always the intent for you guys to tell this story from the lens of humor, and why do you think that was necessary?
It was born out of Joseph and I being holed up during the pandemic and during a really dark time and just trying to make light of things. And it was always meant to be a comedy. And, for example, uh, we remember watching Chris Cuomo broadcasting from, his basement, and he was sort of implying that he was in New York City, but then it came out that he was actually in the Hamptons, and we found that kind of funny. It just was, and how the locals in the Hamptons and other uh, summer destination cities for or summer destination places for New Yorkers were pissed off that all of these like summer folk were coming in like off season and just picking through like the groceries and their hardware stores and whatnot. And we it was Joey and I sitting in front of a computer and cracking up, and that's sort of how Coup was born.
Yeah, there's something really, yeah, darkly funny about all of that you're talking about. It's like it's so
Yeah.
crazy you can't help but laugh. I feel like that's the kind of tone that you
Exactly.
guys
That's what it
bring.
was. And it was just, yeah, it was such a dark time. We needed something, an outlet that we could find some lightness. And that's sort of,
We needed a means to stay sane. So, I think if we were to do it in any other genre but comedy, we may have truly lost our minds. So we saw it as a cathartic outlet.
it's
Oh,
interesting also because originally when we were talking about the concept, we were envisioning it being in the present day. And I think one of us, about a month in, read an article on the similarities between COVID and the Spanish flu. And so then we started imagining the film set during that time period. And for some reason, everything just started to pop when we looked at it through that lens. Because I think having that distance, it enables our themes to resonate on a deeper level.
yeah, and like you guys mentioned earlier, it shows that not a disturbing amount has not changed in over 100 years. That there's still a lot relevant there. Um, there's something diving into the film a little bit. There's something so interesting I find about Magnuson's character. He's the the voice of the people in a sense, and he's championing rights, but there's also something really disingenuous and almost patronizing underlying that. I want to ask you guys, what message were you trying to tell in having a character like this? I guess someone who is kind of outwardly doing the right thing and voicing the right concerns, championing people's rights, but kind of underlying that is this kind of, I don't know, patronizing hypocrisy, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the question is I mean is rightly asked toward the viewer in insofar as how much is Billy aware is Jay, the character of Jay, Billy Magnuson, aware of that duplicity. I mean, in many ways we saw him as somebody who, at least in his own mind, was doing the right thing.
Hmm.
And even if the right thing, even if he's not doing the right thing, the ends justify the means. So he's a righteous believer in, you know, in the policy that he's setting forth. And we, you know, for us, that was an interesting moral and character dimension to explore. um because what is actually justified if you truly believe yourself on the side of the righteous. And it also allows good people to do terrible things if you have that sort of philosophy, one we find all too prevalent in this day and age.
Yeah, I mean, also the idea of performative activism was something that
Hmm.
we wanted to make fun of, to be honest with you. And then that has nothing to do with party lines, politically speaking. It's just it's something that a phenomenon that we see more and more that nobody is speaking enough about. And so that was an inspiration for Billy.
Yeah, and just the
I mean,
comedic,
for Jay, sorry.
yeah, the comedic potential in that. I mean, when you look around Martha's Vineyard or the Hamptons, I mean, it is the bazillionaire class who you know tend to adopt a very socially liberal ideology, and that's, you know, there's inherent comedy in that because, you know, clearly, you know, especially when everyone was sheltering in the spring, what it means to someone like that is very, very different from the people whose policies, whose, you know, who their policies are affecting most profoundly. So there's definitely a dark irony underlying that.
Definitely a dark irony, and especially in comparing like what it was like for the mega, 1% wealthy to shelter at the time as opposed to, the everyday Joe. I think there's an interesting progression during the film in which, at least for me, my empathy for Peter Sarsgaard's character Floyd kind of declined, and my empathy for Magnuson's character kind of increased, and there was something uncomfortable about that as a viewer. Um, I'm curious if you see either of these two guys in this kind of cat and mouse tussle in your film, if you see either of them as quote unquote the bad guy of your tale.
We don't, and that was something that we talked about from the beginning, and that's very intentional. That there is no traditional antagonist or protagonist in the film, and that the audience identification is supposed to shift as the film goes on. So it's cool that you picked up on that.
It was
Yeah,
yeah, definitely picked up on that. I think there's um a lot of there is that interesting dichotomy, whereas um Horton is Jay's this like reform-minded muckraker. He's exposing corruption and so on. But it becomes clear that Floyd is actually kind of more of a genuine muckraker in that sense than Jay is.
Yeah.
But without getting into spoilers, I guess I wanted to ask about Sarsgaard's character and your perspective on him. Do you, as the filmmaker, view him as obviously they're revealed in the final act that we won't touch on, but do you view his character's intentions as noble and kind of aligned with that genuine muckraker that Manison's character is trying to be, or do you think his decisions are born out of self-interest?
both, and I think that's what makes that's what gives him a layer of complexity. I mean, he is, as you know, we meet him as a grifter stealing somebody else's identity. He definitely does a ton of unsavory things to accomplish what on the one hand are completely self-serving ends, but at the same time he's, you know, touched by a sort of humanity, and even a, you know, a spirit of hippie-ish egalitarianism that is, I mean, if it's not a rationalization for self-serving ends, it is, I think, it's nevertheless authentic to his character. I mean, I think he has a sort of a spirit of anarchy that a lot of and a hedonism that a lot of people may feel uncomfortable about, but nevertheless, it's admirable. It's, he's true to himself, and he has none of the hypocrisies of Jay, perhaps to a fault.
Yeah, and I think in that there's so much complexity inherent to his character and the other characters. I don't know, I feel like there's a lot to talk about after this movie. Like it was one of those conversations where like I watched it with my brother, and then it was just afterward just kind of a back and forth between us about the character. So
Did
I
you
think that
laugh?
speaks volumes about the kind of film that you've made, that it doesn't just exist within that 90-minute window, that it kind of transcends that. Um, I did want to ask about the, like, I guess the filmmaking process a little bit. Almost the entirety of the film takes place in this massive estate, which in many ways feels like a character unto itself. It symbolizes a great deal. As filmmakers, I wonder what you found to be challenging about setting your film entirely in one place like this, and what did you find to be, I guess, beneficial or rewarding about that process?
I think the rewarding part of that process is that when you're in one location for most of the shoot, you can spend your time wisely and you could shoot more. So the company moves kill films, and with an independent film where you can't just throw money at everything, it's really important to be efficient like that. Um, that said, we did end up, it's not just one mansion. We ended up piecing together the Horton estate with three different mansions. So there's
Okay,
one for the exterior, one for the interior, and one for the indoor pool.
got
Um,
it.
and so, yeah, that was really interesting. And it took a lot of storyboarding in order to blend those together. And I think the challenging part, I mean, is basically, I think that for this specific film is relaying exposition that's not happening within the estate. If you're trying to
Mm.
establish something that's happening at the market or whatnot, or just in the news, like that becomes the most challenging part. And we spent a lot of time making sure that that exposition was organic.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and I think you do that very well. Yeah, sorry.
no, I was going to say, like, what's forgivable on the stage with plays which are expected with a unity of space to, you're forgiven for that kind of exposition, whereas with a primarily visual medium like film, it's much more of a challenge, because you're, even if unconsciously you're asking as an audience, wait, why am I not seeing that? Where, in a play, you know why you're not seeing it. But I think
Yeah, we
limitation.
had scenes like when we were writing the first draft, we were talking a lot about, well, should we just go to the market with them? Should we feel that? Should we see like, a fight with the locals? That like we had those conversations, and we might have even mocked up some scenes like that. But then we came to this sort of place where we're like, all right, let's just be disciplined about this, and we can't leave this place, and let's get creative and do something really cool with just setting the entire film at this seaside estate, aside from the first few minutes of the film, which take place in the city, obviously.
I think it also leans into this idea of isolation, right? That we as the
Absolutely.
audience are isolated to this
Yeah,
location like that. Um,
totally. I think it's a better film for it. Had we started cutting away like that, it would have definitely it wouldn't have been as tense.
Got it. No, no, I really love that feature. I did want to close out on a more personal question. So after I went into this film blind, not knowing anything about it, I was glad that I did. And then afterward, reading a little bit more about your work, that you two have been childhood friends, but this is really your first collaboration. Having known one another for so long, I imagine you know all these little idiosyncrasies about one another inside and out. Was there anything new about one another's kind of filmmaking approach or creativity or anything like that that was revealed upon working together like this?
You want to
I,
take that?
I answer that one. Um, Actually, I mean, and I say this in a positive way. I would say no. I mean, in terms of anything new being revealed, because we do go so far back in time, and we do have such a shorthand that I think in terms of, an understanding of the other's uh, idiosyncrasies and skill sets. I mean, I think we sort of went into it eyes open in a good way. So I mean, there wasn't in terms of Austin any big surprises. Although I'm never speaking to him again after this film is.
Yeah, I agree with what he just said. I mean, there's of course nuances that came up along the way, but I would say overall it was a very positive experience. You know, for me, I've directed a number of other films, and that's a lonely process, and it was a lot of fun to be able to go through this with with a guy I've known my whole life, and so nothing but positive things to say.
And whenever something does go wrong, you can always blame the other guy, which is a great luxury.
Exactly.
There's always a
Yeah.
scapegoat there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, no, thank you for speaking with me. I really, really enjoyed the film. Like I said, I think it will resonate with a lot of people, and especially given how timely it is, I think there's a lot of conversations to be had about this film. So, yeah, best of luck in promoting the film and unrolling the film